Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Emma Campbell-Webster. I live here in Los Angeles. I'm a writer, an actress, a facilitator, and I met you, Lucy, a very long time ago, maybe 20 years ago or more. I've stopped counting, um, at Oxford University, and we've been talking about the work that's in this workshop we're offering for many years now. And I'm just so excited to be finally able to bring it to other people. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you today to explain a bit more about what it is, because, it's called Lifelines, Restoring Presence and Connection Through the Embodiment of Poetry. And although we know what that is, I can imagine other people thinking, the embodiment of poetry, are we going to be doing interpretive dance? And just to reassure everyone that we're not doing interpretive dance, although, I'm not going to rule anything out. Maybe we will. Um, so yes, Lucinda, tell us about you. Where are you? What's your background?
So my full name is Lucinda Millward, Lucy for short, and I'm now based in Fontainebleau near Paris in France. And I moved here from England. I originally was in London, where I was working as an actor and as a director and teacher at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. And I moved here to join the faculty as acting course director, one of three, at the Fontainebleau School of Acting, which is an international conservatoire which teaches and trains students that would like to be acting in the English classical tradition. And I mainly work with Shakespeare in classical text and poetry and some modern plays as well.
Yes, thank you. And the idea of the ensemble is really important in your work, isn't it? And in that training that you've had. And I wonder if you could just explain a little bit about what that is for anyone who isn't familiar with the concept, and also how that relates to the work that we'll be doing in Lifelines.
Mm. So part of where the magic happens in an acting ensemble, so with actors that are training, is in connection and attunement with
Mm.
others. Because when we speak a line of text, we're not doing that in isolation. We're affecting another. We're speaking with intention to change someone. And when we speak text aloud and it lands in another, it recomposes and reorganizes the partner and also the field that is created in the group. So the premise is that working in an ensemble, that we're always working together
Mm.
as an ensemble, as part of that field. We're not a group of individuals creating change alone. And I think one of the fundamental important principles of ensemble is in the feeling safe within the group in order to take risks and to have the courage to take off our armor and to be seen and heard. And that requires a very safe space, which we cultivate through many different practices. And essentially, I would say that with an ensemble, it's about elevating others to do their best work so that we in turn can fly and take courageous risks.
Mm. I love that. Thank you. Um, so I want to share a little bit about how this workshop is going to be structured. But before we get to that, I wondered if you could share a bit about how you ended up coming to work with poetry in particular, because I know in between your degrees, you have several degrees, one of them was a master's. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that because it feels relevant to this. And then, yeah, just how you ended up landing on poetry in particular as this kind of ideal form for a particular kind of work that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, so when I finished my degree at Oxford, where I met you, I decided that I wanted to be an actor. And so I went and did a year course, an MA in text and performance at RADA, which was also certified by King's College London. So it was partly practical, partly academic. And it was while I was doing that training, which was exciting and really powerfully interesting, that I realized that I had quite a lot of work to do on myself if I was going to be an actor. And it's at
Mm.
that point that I realized that I might need to train and really start to learn how to use my body as an instrument, how to inhabit my body, make it a safe place again, and also learn how to release more confidently my voice. I'd always been someone that found speaking difficult and would self-censor and mute my voice. I used to speak what they would call technically off voice, which I later learned was a precaution, a safety attempt to keep myself safe. And I realized during that year that I would need to do quite a lot of work on emerging and inhabiting myself if I was going to rise to the challenge of meeting roles where you had to reveal and explore and excavate characters who are going through crisis, which most good plays are about people in dark situations trying to navigate the complexities of the human condition. And so I then, after my MA was completed, I ended up applying and doing a 3-year BA where I really learned how to breathe, to inhabit my body again, how to move my body, and how to release my voice. And that was powerful, a powerful experience for me. And while I was acting, and then while I started teaching and my directing work, I'm someone that's very, very passionate about text and unlocking text and what the intention is behind the behaviors that we witness. And I worked a lot on classical texts on Shakespeare, and I started to realize that although it might take 4 or 5 acts for the climax of a play to emerge, that a whole story can happen in 2 lines, in 7 words in a poem, and that that you can be powerfully altered and changed by a poem, that it's a direct conduit to feeling and somehow puts words to the unspeakable. And so my fascination with poetry, I mean, I'd always been excited by poetry, but this idea of releasing truth through the mediating structure of a poem really caught my fascination, and I've been developing it ever since. And I was lucky enough when I started working at the Fontainebleau School of Acting, where I'm acting course director, that I got to do a whole project on poetry, and I could do exactly what I liked. And I quickly discovered that people would bring in poems that they were consciously or unconsciously drawn to in order to release the material within and the resonant interior charge. And it was always incredibly powerful and deeply moving to witness, and that the group would come into coherence and act as a collective witness in this moment, and that something extraordinary would happen. Sometimes we'd have these amazing transformative moments where we'd be recomposed by someone putting language, by expression, and by putting voice to what they've known internally, but not been able to say or not been able to express. And I've become incredibly passionate about it, which is why I've been developing this method, and I've been working increasingly in different environments, different arenas. So not just rehearsal rooms with actors, but I've been working with psychiatric outpatients, building courageous collective containers where we dare to be seen and heard and held. And also in the corporate sector, seeing what it is to put down one's armor, to take oneself out of a braced position and to soften and to attune to another, to explore the art of connection with oneself and what one's feeling, and also with another, and also with the field that's created around us. And so I've been developing this method, working in many different fields, and it's always the same.
Yeah, and I can share from personal experience. I've had the opportunity to take part in this kind of work as a participant, and I think one of the things, um, it's very hard to put into words actually what happens, and it seems it's sort of deceptively simple. Um, well, actually, maybe we can talk about let's go back to the structure and what we're going to be doing, and then I can maybe say a little bit about what my experience was of going through that process. So this is a 2-part workshop, and so in part 1, I'm going to hand over to you. You'll tell us what we're going to do in part 1.
So in part one, we're going to explore a poem, which will be a surprise, and we will explore on the day together. It won't be a difficult poem. It will be a poem that we can hopefully all relate to in some way. It's about what it is to be alive, what it is to be human. It's very accessible and very beautifully written. It's modern. And what we'll do, we'll have a read through and explore some of the themes and the lines of light it takes us on, where it resonates for us. And then what we'll do, we'll select a line or two of that poem which particularly resonate for us personally. And then what we'll do, we'll explore what it is to speak that line to another, what it is to give intention to that line, and what it is to speak with our attention focused on another. And we'll look at how we release the interior charge of that so that it lands meaningfully. And there's something about this poetic space, I think, where it's a space for meaning to be made through encounter. Yeah. And that meaning emerges from the field. So it's not something we can know in advance. It's uncertain, it's unknown. And so that on some level requires courage. But that's also where the magic is. And it's also where transformation can happen. We have to consent to being altered by another, by listening to another. And then something extraordinary can take place. And in that session, we will take this line and we will land that line. And then there'll be a response, there'll be an answer, whether that's vocalized or not. And in the second session, do you want to talk a bit more about the second session?
Yeah. So these two sessions are 1 week apart. So in this week, we'll go away and find some lines of either a poem or it could be just lyrics from a song, something that is very personal to us. And then we're going to bring that back to the group and we'll be sharing the thing that we've selected. So we'll go from this shared exploration where we're all working with the same poem and taking it down another level of kind of vulnerability and intimacy, I would say, by picking something that's speaks very much to us and sharing that. And actually, maybe you can share a little bit about what your experience is of having done this work in groups of the difference between moving from the shared experience of this one poem, where of course we're still bringing what it means to us, and these lines, selecting the lines from the poem that speak deeply to us, will still reveal something, but that there's another level that emerges when we select something that's meaningful to us.
Yeah, I think it's an act of great generosity and also of courage to share something that matters to us and bring it to the group as an offering. And I think when we work on material that really personally speaks to us, whether it's the author, the theme, whether it's a poem in one's own mother tongue, you're able to put words to a feeling that perhaps one has always known, but one has not been able to express. So in a way, there's a deepening of experience when we bring something that we've selected ourselves that has a deep resonance for us. And it is an act of bravery, but I think it feels like the natural next step after having worked as an ensemble with a poem that's been chosen for us. And there's a wonderful autonomy in bringing something that really speaks to us, and it's a delightful present to the group to receive something new and personal that has deep meaning for those individuals.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important is that it's an emergent process. So what happens, what's going to happen in session one is unpredictable. And there's a certain, there's a guiding principle of the poem, and it has inherent themes that will shape where we go, but it's really an alive process, and that's part of the magic of it. And yeah, I just wanted to share that my experience of having done this work with you as a participant is is that it's just um, it's an extraordinary transformation that can happen in an incredibly short time. So we talked about a poem being a brief encounter, and something that, as you said, within just a few lines can take you on a journey. And it's often outside of our conceptual understanding, right? So, and David Whyte says poetry is language against which we have no defenses, and often it's so short and it's not following the lines of logic necessarily that it can kind of undo us and, as you say, recompose us before we've even had a time to catch up. And that's um, a very revealing experience, but one that when done in this safe held container, with the witnessing presence of the others. um, we talk often about this armor and the longing that we all have to drop our masks and take off our armor. And my experience is that a short, beautiful poem has the power to kind of dissolve this armor, leaving us kind of naked in a way, but in the way that we all deeply long for. And then we arrive at a place that I like to call absolute belonging, in the sense of you cannot reduce it anymore. Like there's nowhere else to go from there. Like we're landed back in ourselves, but available to the other. And it's such an extraordinary experience because we do spend most of our lives, consciously or unconsciously, putting on masks, putting up the walls, protecting ourselves. And that's a completely natural process. I mean, it's necessary to go through, to survive in the world. But I think increasingly at this time, people talk about the loneliness epidemic. There's, we're in contact less and less, right? Like I like to think of it as, well, I don't like to think of it, but I talk about it as like this contactless society, right? Like the even the micro touches that we might have had of either going to the checkout in the supermarket and actually talking to a human, and maybe they hand you some change, and there might be the tiniest little brush of contact. And of course, we're going to be on Zoom. We're not actually doing physical contact, but just to be able to experience a sense of genuine connection with another is it's just such a powerful modality, really, that you've developed here, that it's really unique. And I think it's also important to say that although your background and my background is partly in the theatre and in an acting space in a rehearsal room, that this is absolutely nothing about performance. And it's in fact the exact opposite. I mean, you would say, I'm sure, that even in an acting context, we're not trying to, like, you know, put on some kind of performance, but we're, taking back and revealing more and more. Um, so
Yes, it's a coming back to oneself.
yeah,
And I like what
yeah,
you said about, I don't remember quite how you put it, but coming back to your most elemental form.
yeah,
And the beauty of this process is that you're doing it through a mediating structure, the buffer of a
yeah,
poem.
yes,
You're
yes,
not having to delve into particular difficult life experience. We're looking at it joyously and creatively through the lens of poetry.
yeah,
And I think these poems are alive forms waiting to be spoken. And as you said, poetry brings us powerfully into the present. When we're really, really connected and the quality of our attention has shifted. And I think that's important. There's something that shifts in the power of our attention when we do this kind of work. And it's in that moment of deep presence and attunement with another that this emergent phenomena of what I call being recomposed has the chance to evolve. And I think, in a way, poetry, talking just now about isolation and loneliness and our need for contact, our need for attention, our need for touch. how lonely we've become, how fragmented we've become. And this feels like the way home, an anamnesis, a returning to that once remembered belonging.
There are a number of different ways to make contact with a poem, and the one we're all most familiar with is reading it. So it's like a private encounter between us as reader and the poet, and it's done silently from the page to the mind and the heart. Um, Another way, of course, is that we might listen to it being read, or in some cases performed at a poetry slam. But there's a difference here, and we're not simply reading a poem aloud, right? This process that we'll be going through in part one is involves really finding where it lands in our body and where it connects to our own lived experience. And it's making the union between the two and then offering that then creates a powerful experience, not just for the person speaking, but for the group, for and it's just as powerful to be the one in the witnessing position. And it can feel like, as you said, you used the word gift before, it really can feel like receiving just the most beautiful gift from this person, like such a generous offering of intimacy, like a tender intimacy as well.
There's a beautiful line by Andrea Gibson I was talking about with my class today. And that is, even when the truth isn't hopeful, the telling of it is. And I think that even when experiences are difficult and we find lines of poetry that manages to put language to the unsayable,
Yeah.
that which lives at the frontier of language, that in the speaking of it and in the being received in that experience, it helps us tackle life and to meet experiences which cannot be met for me alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a little bit where the name for this workshop came from, right? This idea that obviously it's lines of poetry, but that it's offering a lifeline. It's like, the rope that gets thrown down into the abyss up which you can climb out. Um, and the way that we might offer someone or throwing the life preserver in when someone's drowning, right? And just slowly pulling them back towards you. And I just think, I mean, I can't wait. Is there anything else you wanted to offer before we close out?
I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
And I think it's a way to be in community together. I mean,
Yeah.
community is a funny word, isn't it? But I suppose I mean it in its deepest sense of communion,
Yeah.
the coming
Yeah.
together. And what could be more delightful than to connect with other people and to share things that are important to them and resonate with them, and to be curious.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad that you said that, because it can sound heavy. But I think what's extraordinary is that that it is fun. It's all of the things together, right? It's the vulnerability, it's the revelation, it's the disarmoring, and the meeting of these difficult things potentially that we haven't been able to give voice to, either to ourselves or to others, but that it is playful, and that it is enjoyable, and that it's nourishing, right? It's a profoundly nourishing experience. So yes, um, May 26th, Tuesday, May 26th, and June 2nd on Zoom. Message us if you have any other questions. we'd be delighted to answer them. And we're really looking forward to being with you all. Thank you.